March 8th is the Women's International Day. Now, this global day is meant to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. So today on The Property Show, we bring you face to face with three gritty women who've made it right to the top in an industry as difficult as real estate. Let me introduce you to Sangeeta Prasad, Group CEO of Runwal Group. Now, Sangeeta, an engineer and a management graduate, has worked her way up right to the corner office through traditional industries and I would say male bastions like steel and real estate. Sangeeta, welcome to the show. Also joining me is Renu Mishra, who currently leads the world's #1 brand in bathroom fittings, Groha, for the MENA region. Renu also led Groha over 5 years as Managing Director for India and South Asia, and her story is one of transitioning from a traditional finance role to the top management role to occupy the corner office in one of the most disorganized sectors in real estate, ancillary services. With us also is Pushpa Bector, Executive Director, DLF Retail, Business Head, Luxury and Shopping Malls. She is a name to reckon with in India's retail and mall business, and perhaps the most sought-after voice and leader in this space as well. She too made a transition from hospitality to real estate to rise step by step against all odds in India's largest real estate company. So ladies, thank you very much for joining me today, and I'm going to straight dive in with the first question. Sangeeta, Tata Steel, Mahindra Lifestyle, two large conglomerates of the country, to now a very traditional family-run business or group in real estate. Tell me, what have the challenges been in the journey so far?
So I would like to interpret it not as a challenge, but as a realization.
Okay.
The first realization, and luckily I had it early in life, that the corporate world is not like my growing up world. My growing up world was all about, if you're good in studies, you're feted and celebrated. If you're good in sports, you're feted and celebrated. You have a safe haven in form of a family. And you suddenly land up in a place where, while you are given merit for that, you are also made to realize that you are not one of the many. You are unique and not necessarily in the right ways possible. So that realization, I took it as a challenge. I said, okay, let me understand that and see how I can mitigate that and work with my colleagues who are mainly men. And in light-hearted note, Manisha, I say, I'm so fortunate to have worked in a world of men so that I know that as a woman, I can make my place too. So that's how I interpreted the challenge. It's the realization and how do you work on it.
I like the word realization more than a challenge. Okay, Pushpa, coming to you. I can't believe that it would have been easy for you. DLF, as most other real estate companies in the country, are run by first-generation promoters who like to keep the control it's an industry where trust is hard to come by. What have your experiences been in your rise to the top?
I come from a family from Bangalore with 2 girls. So we were taught that you can achieve anything that you want to. And all you need to do is really work hard and be high on integrity, and the world is your oyster. Shifted to Delhi. And the first few years, I must say, it's quite a rude shock, because it's highly patriarchal. Then Delhi was even more patriarchal. And but I would like to say this, that, it's really up to us as women to really make that mark. For me, it is about a life of perseverance and a life of very clear vision of where I want to be and what I want to achieve for myself and for my family, and that has been the main agenda. Along with that, I must say that when I joined DLF, now DLF at that point, which was 2006, had come into an IPO phase. So they wanted to open up. They wanted to get themselves more into the retail realty space, and also in a space where, they wanted to run it like a corporate, unlike the earlier real estate phase. So in that way, I think the opportunities were there, and it's never easy. It's never easy to make your voice heard. It's never easy to really make people understand around you in a boardroom or in any room that most of the men, they're all men, and you happen to be the one, or there are 2 other women there, and that's just about it. To be heard, to be taken seriously is always a challenge. But That's where grittiness comes into play. And it's also, you've got to just prove that you can do this better, if not equally well.
I think the pressure to do better just is there amongst all the women at whatever phase of career you are in the corporate world. Renu, you've broken the glass ceiling in one of the most, like I said in my opening statement, unorganized markets of real estate ancillaries, right? And switched also from finance to a CEO role and then moved from India to a global role. Has it been any less difficult because Groha is a European company? Tell us about your challenges and experiences.
I think it's just the same as my friends mentioned here, right? So I think Europe does not even boast of any good statistics, and that's where I'm probably a proud Indian. And I would say that at least in back home we have a lot of financial banks and institutions and a lot of industries where you see women as leaders. So I don't think Europe or America are even benchmarks anywhere globally. I think women representation is very low. And we always keep talking about that, is it us to blame because, we are not pushing hard? But I think it's also the school of thought which has to change, right? We are probably all brought up with equal opportunities to study, to, explore the world. But when you enter into corporates, it's about the management and the board, which that's why it should be diverse and inclusive, right? If there is one thought process, it's all men, let's say of one country or one, region together, probably their thinking processes will be similar, and hence they promote talent similarly. I think you just need a few courageous men, who would want to experiment. So I think that happened in my life, that somebody wanted to experiment and say, okay, done a great job as a CFO, so would you want to take this as a challenge? And I said, why not? And, that opportunity actually came through, and somebody was patient for me to learn and grow. And that's where I think it started from, Manisha. So I think, when we say that, all is not fair, yes, maybe not. But then, once I got that opportunity, I made sure that when I am moving, from one country to another or one region to another, I'm also doing that with my fellow women colleagues and encouraging them, hiring them, giving them that encouragement, giving them that platform to be able to see and to be able to do, right? So I think we have a lot of talent across the world. It's just that some women, take the opportunity or take the risk. Some don't, but they need more prodding.
But you brought up a very interesting point, and I'd like to also take our audience through these statistics because, there's no other, the reason why we bring a special discussion or a debate around Women's International Day is to also remind people of what's happening on gender gap. So it's not just India. As per the Global Gender Gap Report 2021, published by the World Economic Forum, India is, of course, ranked at 140 out of 156 countries. Now, in India, despite the country being Asia's third largest economy, also has one of the lowest rates of female labor participation in the world at 21%. And if you look at the smaller and less developed neighbors, so Bangladesh is at 30.5% and Sri Lanka at 33.7%. Only 8.9% of firms in India have women as top managers. Sangeeta, is it harder in real estate than it is probably outside? Because, this is an industry where you have to deal with government officials, you have to deal with construction companies. These are now processes which anyway are mired with delays, distrust and complex processes.
The good news is that the world is a universal truth. So it's not my personal experience, since I've worked in steel and in a large group as well as in real estate. It's a story same everywhere. It's how the world perceives, because it's if you see what's happening in the world around, and as you rightly said, and I think the data says that it's all across, the data is uniform. It is about how people respond to situations and how you go about doing your daily work. And what I've realized is it's not only men, it is also women who need to understand that. And that's why I spoke about realization. How do you realize? How do you navigate? And what Manisha, you told her, the tad better. How are you a tad better? And the two things which has worked for me, irrespective of the sector I've been, is dignity and distance. and deep diving in what you have to deliver. If those things happen, that's on the harder side of things. On the softest aspect, I would like to say, when we as women leaders, how are we responding to the ecosystem around us and the colleagues around us? It's not only women, it's also the men around us. How do you sensitize them as influencers? As you get into a position of influence, are you giving the right signals, the right messages when things go out of whack? I think that's extremely important. And it is for all of us who are on screen today and otherwise to realize it's not enough to empower women. It is also to sensitize men. And I think that's how the world will become a much more diversity inclusive place. That's my personal experience. And I think it works.
I think these are really, really important words which you're sharing with everybody. Pushpa, I mean, two things that I'm carrying here is they always say that why do you tell your daughters to dress a certain way because to avoid any violence against women? Why don't you just teach your boys to be sensitive, right? It's the same in the corporate boardroom or in the corporate world, isn't it? It cannot just be, women doing better to try and climb. There's also this whole women traits, women leader traits, which are empathy, working together with people, trying and being collaborative, vis-a-vis a men's style in general. And I'm not saying all men, which is more authoritative and more punitive. And somehow those values are still given a lot more predominance over what women are called to be more emotional. And that kind of tends to hold them back, which is so unfair, isn't it?
Manisha, I have a problem with the very term that women are only empathetic and they are collaborative and they can't be authoritative, or men are not empathetic. I see in my career around me equally men who are sensitive or insensitive and women who are insensitive or sensitive. So I think that itself is something that, we need to stay away from. What we need to do is, and what we can do is, as women leaders, walk the talk and create an ecosystem around us where when we are faced with issues, how do we tackle those issues? How do we get the men around us to tackle those issues? And there are issues that crop up. We are in a highly people-led organization. So it's how you tackle those issues that make you define yourself as a leader and your team, and how you what's the ecosystem you create. And that creates a culture where it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. What matters is merit. What matters is how well you do your job, and how do you rise to the occasion. I think those are the things that we need to go towards. And I really am rooting for a day when we don't need to celebrate an International Women's Day. Why do we need a Women's Day?
Well, Pushpa, if you would just know the statistics, it will take 195 years if we continue to go at the current rate to close the gender gap on the paid economic and labor front. That's so, this is a long conversation. It is not today. And I hope to God that it's not 195 years. We probably have to stop doing it at least in 100 years. But Renu, it's an interesting thing that, we should not be slotting women as the only ones having certain leadership traits vis-a-vis men. But also sometimes, do you feel that, women themselves are their own best enemy? They probably tend to, give up too easily when they're faced with multiple challenges, or is that being a little too harsh? Do you believe that if they had enough support, maybe you would have more professional women not giving up too easily, especially in that mid-management rank?
Absolutely. I think the biggest, I won't say that it's the biggest enemy syndrome, but I think it starts from the culture, right? I mean, the whole culture of giving, inclusion and empathy, it's natural to us. Why do we say that we need more women on board? Is because we get a different perspective, because that's how we are wired, right? So we get that. I mean, motherhood, or let's say, nurturing is an emotion which is natural to women, right? So we are born with that. So sometimes when it comes a situation of, okay, who needs to take a back seat in the career, assuming that, both the partners are equally educated and equal opportunities. end up being women because you feel that naturally you should, because you're the mother and obviously you have guilt pangs of leaving your children behind, you take a back seat. Not that they're less worthy. So I think I'm probably a reverse example, and I always say that, that at a juncture in time when I was moving from India to Middle East, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, the first year I pretty much worked alone, leaving my family back in Delhi, and I was, traveling across the region and also back to Delhi. But that's not long term, right? So finally, we said as a family, we need to be together. So my husband quit his job and joined me, right? It's rare because it needs men to be sensitive, to have the courage to do that and acknowledge the fact that, probably this is a time that your wife is shining and I need to support her. Mm. So what do we need to do? We need to step back and actually, what you said, we need to educate our boys differently, that all of you are equal, and probably, that's where you will have to, in your lifespan of, let's say, of being 40, 50 years together as partners, as an example, you will also have to do this. Sometimes you take the backseat and sometimes your wife does, right? As an example, right? And you bring up children together. Otherwise, more and more families are choosing not to have children because they want to focus on a career. So how does a corporate encourage families also to be part of a bigger, ecosystem, is to do this. I mean, give everybody equal opportunities, welcome women back after maternity, and not put a very big question mark that, oh, will she be able to deliver 24/7? We need to create, as women leaders, that system and give them that assurance that this is possible. Right. Okay. So we have a long way to go.
We have a long way to go, but let's also come back and look at why it's important to take rapid strides rather than just take baby steps at bringing more women into the labor force. The data on what it could do to the well-being of a country or the GDP of a country is quite astounding. Stay with us. Ahead of the International Women's Day, we have three outstanding women from real estate to discuss how we can drive a level playing field for women in the corporate world. But before I resume our discussion, let's take a look at why it makes sense for corporate leaders and governments across the world to really work hard at gender equality in the labor market. Now, McKinsey Global Institute report, The Power of Parity, calculates that advancing women's equality can add to $12 trillion to global growth, or 11% in annual GDP by 2025. My God, that's an astounding number for the world struggling to come out of COVID and get back to full form on economic growth. Now, in a full potential scenario in which women play an identical role in the labor market to that of men, as much as $28 trillion or 26% could be added to the global annual GDP by 2025. This impact is roughly equivalent to the size of the combined Chinese and US economies today. Pushpa, women for women, it can change a lot, right, as well. One person, it could be, again, I'm not saying that men can't do it. In fact, most of us women who are at the top, and I'll be openly acknowledge Dr. Roy's contribution to many of us who have climbed the ladder in the media world. But tell me, women to women, what can we do to make it happen faster?
Well, 2-3 things. One is increase the number of women and increase the ratio. In DLF retail, we now have 25% as working who are women, and it's actually changed and worked for us because we get a more diverse opinion, as you rightly said, and I would tend to say a creative and task-oriented cusp. The second thing that we need to do is COVID has done a lot of bad things, but one thing that's good is that hybrid work mode has been accepted as a reality. So for those women who are coming out of their maternity leave, who may need that hybrid work culture for a year or so, it's a reality and a possibility. And I think we all, as women, should accept that and nurture that environment within our workforces, which will ensure that those talented women who drop off the workforce after becoming a mother stop doing so. And third and most important thing is also that, nurture the men as much as the women. The more we nurture them and make them realize that you need good, working, talented women around you to, it's equally important.
Renu, your point, I know you started by talking about the fact that at the time when women really become mothers is the time when they need probably the maximum support for them not to fall off the work ladder. But any other ideas and thoughts that you have or what you're doing right now at Groha to make that happen?
I think I agree on the hybrid model. I think it's done wonders for women. I can go back to my own time and having my 2 kids and can say that it was so difficult to pursue a 9-to-5 job, traveling in streets of Delhi, traveling up to Gurgaon, and also trying to match the time with the kids. I can imagine how many times I had that guilty feeling and wanted to quit, right? But went on. So I think that's hybrid model is the great thing. But I think what we also did was get women early. So we started a student program in our region where we are hiring students, men and women alike, making them work in different geographies and different functions. So we are already skilling them up and also giving them an experience of different countries, different functions, different competencies. So when they grow up in their career, we also have them ready, even if they're going through marriage or let's say, if they have old parents to take care of and they want those breaks. We know that they can move from one country to another, one function to another, continuing, right? And not quitting. It's very important to create an ecosystem like that. So create a culture of nurture and also making sure that men are sensitized to. So in all our Women Day, events or celebrations, all men are also invited. It cannot be that we keep fighting the battle for our gender. They need to be more sensitive. And as the world is, going in with equity discussions, I think getting into conversations and encouraging and mentoring women to talk about their career, their salaries, their pay parity, it's not a taboo. So, they should
and this salary parity thing we haven't even spoken about, but I mean, women still make 84 cents to $1 that men make despite being right at the top. Sangeeta, go ahead. Your thoughts.
What happens with women, and you use the word gritty, adverse situations actually shape and mold us. So in an organization, giving tasks which are important, significant, and passing on the signal, and when we girls pass the test, we actually do a lot for other girls as well. The second thing I would like to add is what I call is mainstreaming diversity. The more you make policies which are uniquely adapted to women, you make the others feel insecure. So whether it is flexi policy, hybrid policy, work from home, companies should ensure that they are applicable to all. Because what happens then people start empathizing, connecting to the policy. Third, I would like to say, and I'll use the example of the group I've just joined. It's very interesting. Sandeep's philosophy is much ado about nothing on diversity. And that is why we have 4 to 5 senior HODs who are women. And in very important functions like marketing, design, legal, finance, so that gives a lot of support. That don't try to create artifacts, just go and act on it and treat a person as a resource and a respectable and valuable resource and get them to deliver. And you will see diversity creeping in nicely and pleasantly into your organization.
Thank you very much for sharing your journey, your experiences, and of course, your advice to improve gender parity in the corporate world. Critical takeaways from this discussion. And like I said, 195 years, we will continue to have this discussion and conversation for many, many more years to come. Thank you so much. All that I'm going to conclude with is all the traits that make a woman stand out, be it the corporate world or the government, which is decisive, nurturing, empathetic, collaborative, ethical, people first, are the very, very traits that the world desperately needs today. Now imagine if Russia had a woman president. Would we have this war and such human devastation in Ukraine? Think about it. Goodbye and thanks so much for watching.